Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, checking your bank account, and finding exactly the same amount of money you had yesterday. Nothing has been stolen. Nothing has disappeared. Yet somehow, you're poorer. Not because someone took your money, but because your money can no longer buy the life it once could. Your groceries cost more. Your rent just went up. Your electricity bill is higher. Your insurance costs more. Even your morning coffee feels strangely expensive. And suddenly, you're asking yourself a question that millions of people around the world are asking too. Why does it feel like we are all getting poorer? Because you're not imagining it. Something has changed. A generation ago, one salary could buy a house, support a family, pay the bills, and still leave enough money to save for the future. Today, many people have two incomes and still struggle to do the same. People are working longer, working harder, working smarter, yet somehow falling further behind. So what happened? Did people suddenly become lazy? No. Did everyone suddenly become bad with money? Not even close. In fact, the global economy is producing more wealth than at any other point in human history. Companies are breaking profit records. Artificial intelligence is creating billion-dollar businesses overnight. Stock markets continue reaching all-time highs. The number of billionaires keeps growing. So if the world is becoming richer, why does everyone else feel poorer? Who's taking the money? Is inflation really the villain? Are billionaires responsible? Did governments break the economy? Or is the system working exactly the way it was designed to? Because here's the truth. This isn't just a story about money. It's a story about power, about psychology, about the invisible rules that quietly decide who builds wealth and who spends an entire lifetime chasing it. By the end of this documentary, you'll understand why millions of hardworking people feel trapped, why getting a raise no longer feels like getting ahead, and why the biggest financial problem of our generation has almost nothing to do with how hard you work. It has everything to do with the game you're playing. And once you see the rules, you'll never look at money, the economy, or your future the same way again. Let me ask you something. If I told you that the average salary today is higher than it was 20 years ago, would you believe people are becoming richer? Most people would say, of course. Higher income means a better life, right? Except that's no longer true. Today, millions of people are earning more money than their parents ever did, yet they're living with more stress, more debt, and less financial security. How is that possible? Because we've been measuring wealth the wrong way. Most people focus on one number, income, but income has never been the thing that makes you wealthy. What matters is what your money can actually buy. Economists call this purchasing power. Imagine someone gives you a 10% raise. At first, it feels like progress. You celebrate. Maybe you even reward yourself. A nicer apartment, a newer car, a better phone. Then, a few months later, your rent goes up. Groceries become more expensive. Insurance increases. Gas prices rise. Your electricity bill jumps. Suddenly, that 10% raise is gone. Not because you spent it carelessly, but because life became more expensive, faster than your income grew. Now imagine this happening every single year. That's exactly what millions of people are experiencing. They're climbing the financial ladder, while someone quietly keeps moving the ladder higher. No matter how fast they climb, they never seem to get closer. This is why working harder doesn't always feel rewarding anymore, because you're not racing against your coworkers. You're racing against the rising cost of life itself. And here's where things become even more dangerous. Most people think, if I just earn more money, everything will be fine. But history tells a different story. People who double their salary often double their spending. A bigger house, a more expensive car, luxury vacations, designer clothes. Their income grows, but so do their obligations. They become richer on paper, while remaining financially trapped. It's one of the greatest illusions of modern life. The illusion that more income automatically creates more wealth. It doesn't. Because if your expenses grow just as fast as your paycheck, nothing really changes. You're simply running on a faster treadmill. So if higher salaries aren't making people wealthier, then what's actually stealing the value of our money? The answer is hiding in plain sight. And almost every government, every central bank, and every economy depends on it. It's called inflation. Imagine someone stealing $1 from your wallet every single day. You'd notice eventually. You'd get angry. You'd want to know who's taking your money. But what if nobody touched your wallet at all? What if your money simply became worth less without anyone taking it? That's exactly what inflation does. Most people think inflation means prices go up. That's not actually the problem. That's just the symptom. The real problem is much more dangerous. Your money loses purchasing power. Think of money like ice. The day you earn it, it's a solid block. But if you leave it sitting there, day after day, year after year, it slowly melts. Nobody stole it. Nobody touched it. Yet somehow, there's less of it than before. Money works the same way. $100 today won't buy what $100 bought 10 years ago. And 10 years from now, it will buy even less. Now here's the shocking part. Most people think inflation is an accident. Something that just happens. It isn't. Inflation is a natural consequence of how modern economies work. Imagine a small island. There's only 100 apples and only $100. Simple. Each apple costs $1. Now imagine the government prints another $100. But there are still only 100 apples. Has the island become richer? No. There are simply more dollars chasing the exact same number of apples. What happens next? The price of apples rises. Not because apples became more valuable, because money became less valuable. That's inflation. And this happens on a global scale. Whenever more money enters the economy, faster than real goods and services are created, prices begin to rise. Sometimes slowly, sometimes very quickly. Now don't misunderstand this. Printing money isn't always evil. During financial crises, governments often inject money to prevent businesses from collapsing, to save jobs, to stop panic. Sometimes it works, but every solution has a price, and that price is often paid years later by ordinary people through higher prices, lower purchasing power, and shrinking savings. But here's where the story becomes truly unfair. Inflation doesn't hurt everyone equally. If you keep your wealth in cash, inflation quietly eats it away. But if you own businesses, stocks, real estate, assets, those things often rise in value as inflation rises, which means the wealthy aren't always running from inflation. Many times, they're running ahead of it. And while everyone else watches their money lose value, the wealthy are watching their assets become even more valuable. That's why inflation isn't just making life more expensive. It's quietly making the wealth gap even bigger. But inflation alone still doesn't explain why so many people feel trapped. Because there's another force silently working against you. A force that decides whether you'll spend the next 30 years paying someone else's mortgage or building wealth for yourself. There was a time when buying a house wasn't considered a luxury. It was considered normal. Your parents, or maybe your grandparents, worked a regular job, saved money for a few years, bought a home, raised a family, and slowly built wealth. That was the dream. Today, for millions of young people, that dream feels almost impossible. Think about this. If your parents bought their first home in their 20s, could you do the same today? For most people, the answer is no. Not because they're lazy, not because they don't work hard, because the game changed. In many parts of the world, House prices have grown much faster than salaries. Imagine trying to catch a train. That keeps accelerating. You run faster. The train moves faster. No matter how hard you try, you never catch it. That's exactly what saving for a house feels like today. You save for 1 year. Prices rise. You save for another year. Prices rise again. You finally have enough for a down payment. Interest rates increase. The finish line keeps moving. But why? Did houses suddenly become more valuable? Not really. Several powerful forces collided at the same time. Cities became more crowded. Construction couldn't keep up with demand. Investors realized houses weren't just places to live. They were investments. Large corporations began buying thousands of homes. Investment funds entered the market. People with money started competing against people who simply wanted a place to live. And whenever demand grows faster than supply, prices explode. That's basic economics. But housing is different. Because unlike luxury watches or sports cars, you can't choose not to need a home. Everyone needs somewhere to sleep. Which means, when housing becomes expensive, people don't stop buying. They simply sacrifice everything else. They delay having children. They postpone retirement. They stop investing. They give up vacations. They work overtime just to afford a roof over their heads. And here's the part almost nobody notices. The more money you spend on housing, the less money you have to build wealth. You're no longer investing in your future. You're simply surviving the present. That's why housing isn't just another expense. For most families, it's the single biggest financial decision they'll ever make. And when that decision becomes more expensive every year, the entire economy begins to change. Young people delay adulthood. Families have fewer children. Stress increases. Savings disappear. The middle class slowly begins to shrink. But while millions struggle just to buy one home, a small group of people has been buying hundreds because they understand something that most people never learn. The richest people don't just earn money. They own the things that become more valuable when everyone else is struggling. At this point, you might be thinking, so the rich are getting richer because they already have more money. That's only part of the story. The real reason is far more powerful. Imagine two people. The first person wakes up every morning, drives to work, works 8 hours, gets paid, and repeats the same cycle tomorrow. The second person also wakes up, but instead of going to work, their money goes to work. Their stocks rise. Their businesses generate profit. Their real estate earns rent. While they're sleeping, their wealth keeps growing. This is the biggest financial divide in the modern world. Most people work for money. The wealthy own things that produce money. Think about Apple. Every time someone buys an iPhone, millions of people become customers. But only one small group becomes richer. The shareholders. The owners. Now think about Amazon. Every package delivered. Every Prime subscription renewed. Every cloud server rented. Creates more value. Again, not for the employees alone, but for the people who own the company. This is why Warren Buffett once said, "If you don't find a way to make money while you sleep, you will work until you die." It sounds dramatic, but history keeps proving him right. Let's rewind for a moment. In 1997, a single share of Amazon cost less than $2. Most people ignored it. Some thought online shopping would never replace retail. Others were too afraid to invest. Today, that same company is worth trillions of dollars. The people who owned even a tiny piece of it watched their wealth multiply. Not because they worked harder, because they owned an asset that kept creating value. This pattern repeats everywhere. Stocks, real estate, businesses, even intellectual property. Ownership compounds. Salary usually doesn't. That's why two people earning the exact same income can end up living completely different lives 20 years later. One spends every paycheck. The other slowly buys assets. One depends on their next salary. The other builds income. That doesn't require showing up every morning. And here's the mistake almost everyone makes. They think, I'll start investing when I become rich. But the people who eventually become wealthy usually start investing long before they're rich, because wealth isn't created the day you become successful. It's created the day you begin thinking like an owner, the moment you stop asking, how can I earn more? And start asking, what can I own that will keep growing? Everything begins to change, but there's still one invisible enemy, powerful enough to destroy all of this. Not inflation, not housing, not taxes, not even debt. The enemy is sitting inside your own mind. There's an invisible prison. Almost everyone is born inside it. The strange part is, the doors are never locked. Yet millions of people spend their entire lives without ever escaping. That prison has a name. Scarcity. Not the scarcity of money, but the scarcity of belief. The belief that there will never be enough. Not enough income. Not enough opportunities. Not enough time. Not enough security. And once that belief takes control, it quietly begins controlling every financial decision you make. You don't invest because you're afraid of losing. You don't start a business because you're afraid of failing. You keep your savings sitting in cash because it feels safe. You stay in a job that drains your energy because leaving feels too risky. Little by little, fear becomes your financial advisor. And fear has one job: to keep you exactly where you are. Think about the greatest investors in history. Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, Ray Dalio. None of them became wealthy because they never felt fear. They became wealthy because they learned to make decisions despite it. Now compare that to the average person. When markets crash, they panic. When prices fall, they sell. When opportunities appear, they hesitate. When everyone else is buying, they are afraid. When everyone else is afraid, they're finally ready to buy. They do exactly the opposite of what creates wealth. Why? Because emotions always feel more convincing than logic. Fear whispers, protect what little you have. But growth whispers, build what you don't have yet. And here's the irony. The wealthiest people don't think differently because they already have money. They have money because they learned to think differently. While most people ask, what if I lose? Successful people ask, what if this changes my life? One question creates hesitation. The other creates opportunity. That's why two people can look at the exact same investment and see completely different futures. One sees danger. The other sees possibility. Neither knows the future, but their mindset determines which path they choose. Money doesn't just reward intelligence. It rewards perspective. If you believe the world is full of opportunities, you'll start noticing them everywhere. If you believe the world is against you, you'll find proof of that too. Your financial future usually follows your expectations, not because of magic, because expectations shape decisions, and decisions shape reality. But there is one final truth, a truth so simple that most people ignore it until it's too late. It has nothing to do with inflation, nothing to do with billionaires, nothing to do with governments. It has everything to do with the person you become every single day. Imagine losing everything you own: your house, your car, your savings, your investments, everything you worked for, gone. Now imagine there is still one thing nobody can take from you. Not inflation, not a recession, not a financial crisis, not even a failed economy. That thing is your ability to create value. Because the greatest asset you will ever own isn't sitting in your bank account. It's sitting inside your mind. Think about it. The world is constantly changing. 20 years ago, some jobs didn't exist. Some companies didn't exist. Some of the biggest industries today were just ideas. The people who adapted built fortunes. The people who refused to change were left behind. That's the uncomfortable truth about money. The market doesn't reward effort alone. It rewards value. Person can work 12 hours every day, but if their skills solve a small problem, their income will remain limited. Another person can solve a massive problem and create millions in value. That's how the world works. Not by how tired you are, by how valuable you become. But most people stop learning the moment they leave school. They believe education ends after graduation. But successful people understand something different. Graduation isn't the end of learning. It's the beginning. Because the world doesn't pay you for what you know today. It pays you for what you can solve tomorrow. Look at every major shift in history. The internet, smartphones, artificial intelligence. Every major change created winners and losers. Not because some people were smarter, but because some people prepared before everyone else. They learned new skills. They adapted. They positioned themselves where the future was going, while others waited until the future had already arrived. This is why investing in yourself can be more powerful than investing money. A stock can fall. A business can fail. A market can crash. But every skill you build, every lesson you learn, every experience you gain, compounds with time. Nobody can take that away. Imagine spending just 1 hour every day, learning something valuable. Finance, communication, technology, sales, business, investing. After 1 year, you have built hundreds of hours of knowledge. After 10 years, you become someone completely different. While millions spend their free time consuming, you spend yours creating. And eventually, the gap becomes impossible to ignore. Because wealth isn't created when you suddenly earn millions. Wealth is created when you become the type of person who can create millions of value. So maybe the question isn't, why is everyone getting poor? Maybe the better question is, am I becoming more valuable every year? Because in a world that keeps changing, the safest investment isn't money. It's becoming someone the world cannot ignore. 20 years from now, you probably won't remember the phone you upgraded, the sneakers you bought, or the expensive dinner you barely enjoyed. But you will remember the opportunities you ignored, the investments you postponed, the risks you were too afraid to take. Because time has a strange habit. It turns today's small decisions into tomorrow's biggest regrets. One day, you'll wake up, look back at your life, and realize something almost everyone realizes. Far too late. Your future never arrived. All at once. It arrived. One ordinary day at a time. One paycheck. One habit. One decision. One excuse. Again. And again. And again. Until those tiny moments quietly became your entire life. That's why this documentary was never really about money. Money was only the symptom. The real subject was choice. Every day, you are choosing. You're choosing whether to consume or create, whether to spend or invest, whether to complain or improve, whether to stay comfortable or become valuable. And every single choice is casting a vote for the person you'll become. Because financial freedom was never about becoming rich. It's about having options. The option to leave a job without fear. The option to spend time with the people you love. The option to say no. The option to live life on your own terms. Money doesn't guarantee happiness, but it removes many of the things that steal it. Stress, fear, dependence, the constant feeling that you're running out of time. Here's the truth almost nobody tells you. The biggest investment you'll ever make isn't in stocks. It isn't in real estate. It isn't in Bitcoin. It's in the person who makes every financial decision you'll ever make. You. Because the moment you change, everything else begins changing too. Your habits, your income, your opportunities, your future. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not next month. But slowly, silently, inevitably. And one day, People will look at your life and call it luck. They'll never see the hundreds of ordinary decisions that built it. So before you leave, ask yourself one question. 20 years from now, when your future self looks back at today, will they smile because this was the day everything changed? Or will they whisper, I wish I had started then? The choice has always been yours. If this documentary changed the way you think about money, don't let it become just another video you watched. Let it become the first investment in a completely different future. Subscribe to Nera Explain for documentaries that help you understand money, business, AI, and the hidden forces shaping the modern world. Because the future isn't built by one big decision. It's built by the small decisions you make, starting today. Thank you for watching. And remember, your future is already being written.